All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our monthly webinar, less to one from last month. And our topic tonight is finding your niche in real estate development. And it's a relevant topic for, It's a relevant topic for everybody. And it's one that we can speak to primarily because we have a niche. And so as we go through the content that we have put together tonight, and it's not slides. People are expecting slides. It's going to be just a dialogue this evening. As we go through it, we can certainly say or talk to people or talk to our audience about how we found our niche and the things that we've done to expand on and grow our business while developing and becoming knowledgeable in a particular area of real estate investing. Well, I'll start by talking. We do have bullet points. We just don't have slides.
Okay.
So why do you need to find a niche? And the reasons for finding a niche is you want to become an expert or at least become knowledgeable in a particular area. And the analogy I like to use is when you're in high school, your knowledge is very general. Even your undergrad degree, your knowledge is very general. As you get into the more advanced degrees in university, you pick a very narrow area and you start to dive deeper in it and become more knowledgeable about it. If you're someone who's inclined to do a PhD, not me, but if you were someone inclined to do a PhD, then you go incredibly deep in a very, very narrow area. And as you become an expert and very knowledgeable in that one deep area, your ability to take that knowledge and translate it across a wider domain increases significantly. So, becoming an expert in one area doesn't mean you've neglected others. You can take that deep knowledge and translate it, but you can't be a deep knowledge person in all the areas. So you do have to pick something and say, I'm going to learn more about that. And what I learn while I'm becoming an expert in those areas, I can then in that area, I can translate to other areas more easily. So to grow your knowledge, you have to pick something and go at it. You can't say, I'm going to become an expert in everything. There's an expression, jack of all trades, master of none. So you need to pick something and decide to become a master in that area. And then that mastery will increase your ability to work in other areas. So we'll talk a little more. Finding a niche also means that you're able to focus on what kind of investors do I want, what kind of tenants am I looking for, what kind of development sites am I looking for in the city. So you become familiar with your city's bylaws. And once you know your city's bylaws for your area, you'll also know them for the rest of the city. So that an area where that's in one domain where once you become an expert in a small spot, you can translate that across a much broader category or many more areas than just your niche. You also are going to have to know what properties would work for your development. So things like neighborhoods, zoning, size, proximity to amenities, things like that, proximity to transit, depending on what you're trying to do. All those things are areas that you're going to have to grow your knowledge in to develop a niche, regardless of where that niche happens to be. And the last bullet, here's a particular good one. Real estate development's a lot of work. You don't have time to do it all yourself. You have to pick an area and become knowledgeable in that area. So that's the reasons why you really want to try to find a niche. And within the domain of real estate, there are many. I can at the top of the list: residential development, commercial development, hospitality and tourism, specialized properties, things like self-storage or data centers, car washes, things like that. Urban redevelopment, infill, sustainable development's a niche. REITs that's a sort of a take on real estate investing, but they're a niche as well. You can look at international real estate. You can focus on social impact housing. There's also a niche for real estate technology and innovative investing in real estate stuff. And then within each of those, I mean, that's probably a little too general to be a niche. That would be like deciding in your bachelor degree to go into, I don't know, business or economics or those kinds of things. And then when you get in there, you're going to focus further down. So things like residential development, you can go to luxury condominiums, multifamily apartment buildings, affordable housing developments. You can do subdivisions and single family homes. That's what got Minto started, and Claridge and many other places who now also do large multifamily development, but they do a lot of subdivision work as well. Senior living communities, and one that's near and dear to our hearts, student housing. Student housing is a niche.
Yep.
So that's not an exhaustive list. That's a fairly quick list.
Yeah, examples
of things that you can do. Even inside student housing, and it would be the same for all the others as well. There's what size and scale of building do you want? Are you particular with the type of students that you're looking for? Is it student exclusively or student focused housing? Because that'll have some impact on the decisions you make when you're looking for your property or when you're doing your design work. There's a lot of, even under the guise of student housing or senior living. Are you looking for senior living like people that can take care of themselves? Do you want to provide more full service with that? Are you providing them with meals or just a place to live where they have access to other seniors and they haven't got to worry about cutting the grass? So there's a full range of services you can provide even within each of those niches. And maybe you don't focus on one area in there, but it's to be aware that you can, again, deeper and deeper and deeper and more focused. And the better you focus and the more you understand the market that you're going after, the more effective you can be talking to investors, looking for your projects, talking to lenders, all the things you have to do to make projects happen. If you're very generic and from one project to the next you haven't focused, it's every time you go talk to a lender or to a potential investor, it's a whole new conversation. It's well, have you done this before? It's like, well, I've done all these other things, but now I'm going to do that instead. That's a tougher conversation to have than, well, we've done 5 of these now. Each one we've grown in scale, we've gotten smarter, and this is our trajectory, and it's all with a theme to it. It's a much better conversation to have with an investor, with anybody, really, even at the city, right? If you're in a niche and you're finding things and growing your knowledge inside the city, you're finding this, you're getting the names of the staff you need to deal with to work in your area, and you can go back to them project after project. If you're continually switching, if you're in residential one day and commercial the next and industrial the next, the people at the city you're going to talk to are very different. The lenders are very different. It's important to have a plan and stick to it in that area. Commercial development, office, retail, shopping malls, industrial parks. There's the condo, what are they called? Condo industrial places where you can rent a bay in an industrial complex, medical office buildings, healthcare facilities, and we know nothing about any of these things.
Yeah, we focus on the residential development and particularly student housing. So it's many other niche where we're not specialists. That's the point of the.
I would say not even knowledgeable.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point, that you should choose your niche and develop that.
We did a real estate development course last fall at Carleton University, and that was fairly generic. It wasn't focused on a particular niche, and there was conversations about commercial space, office space, industrial space, how to do development and pro formas for that. And it was educational to have that experience, but very much at the surface level. We didn't dive deep into anything, and the broadness of the program made it applicable to just about anybody. So that part was very good, and they were smart enough not to go deep in any one particular area, because that would have really narrowed down the audience that they were going to work with. So, but they, even in that course, talked about find your niche, find your area, and get good in that area. Don't think you can do everything. So, and the people that came and taught us, they came from companies who those are big companies' names that would be recognized if you're in the Ottawa area, and they have niches. They have things that they like to do and they're particularly good at. So at whatever level you're operating at, whether it's your first SDU or you have several $100 million buildings already under your belt, you're going to find an area that you want to focus in and work in that area. Hospitality and tourism, hotels, resorts, vacation rental properties, bed and breakfast, Airbnb investments, things like that. I talked about things like self-storage, data centers. They're high cost, but I guess once you're locked in there, you have a lease for a long, long time. Movie theaters, things like that. Infill development. Now, infill or urban redevelopment, it's called in my notes. And actually, we have a friend of ours and an Oreo executive member who's quite good at what's called adaptive reuse projects, which is converting historic buildings into residential or commercial spaces. And I don't know if anybody can guess that gentleman's name. I don't mind giving him a shout out. It's Christian Spilfogel. And he has pretty much an entire portfolio that focuses in that area. So that's Christian's niche. He's incredibly good at it. And he's grown a healthy portfolio just in that one niche. And he's a very knowledgeable real estate investor who's found his niche and has done wonderful things with it. There's also brownfield redevelopment, which that's a whole different skill set that requires knowledge of contamination and how to deal with it. And that I wouldn't recommend that for someone starting out. That's larger companies with deep pockets and knowledgeable engineering staffs. But it's an area, again, where there are people that focus in that area. They go looking for troubled properties, and they'll buy up things from the government that the government's done terrible things on, and they'll clean it all up and redevelop it. I can't remember the name of the site, but there was an old D&D base out near Montreal Road, not far from NRC, National Research Council, and that was D&D space that got sold off to some big developers who had a lengthy cleanup period. But now we've been there and looked at some of the buildings, and they're quite attractive. So again, you can, and of course that land would have been pretty much for free in the middle of the city because of the amount of cleaning that had to be done on it. So if you can have that conversation about we'll clean the land up and put something on it, but the land has to be appropriately priced for what we have to do to it. If you have the niche to know how to do that, then you have a pro forma that basically has zero cost land, probably a pretty healthy line item for cleanup though. What else? Things like transit oriented developments. If you want to do big towers near stops for the LRT. Or downtown revitalization initiatives. I know there's a lot of talk about converting the unused office space into residential space, and there's some limitations on that. That's an expertise that at this point I'd suggest we don't have anybody with that expertise right now, but I know there's people who are working on growing that, and so they're gonna develop that niche, and they'll learn what buildings are good, what buildings are not good. And they'll pursue the buildings that they can do cost effective working. So again, that's that idea of having a niche. Sustainable development, that can be a niche, or it can be a part of other types of projects. For instance, in our example, and this is not just driven by a few things, but to get MLI Select, we were having that conversation before we started the recording. To get MLI Select funding for multi-unit projects, you don't need, but one of the effective ways to do that is through energy efficiency. So then if you're looking at green buildings or eco-friendly buildings like net zero homes, that kind of thing, that approach applied to a multi-unit building will allow you to achieve the points you need to do an MLI Select mortgage on energy efficiency, at least for 10 more days. At which point you can only get half the points you need for energy efficiency, but you can still get half those points for energy efficiency. And you also have some other benefits from that. You have lower operating costs for your building. To get that energy efficiency, you usually end up with a much better building envelope. So that's a better quality space for your tenants to live in. A better envelope means your building's going to last longer and you'll have less maintenance issues. So there's a whole raft of things that come from that are beneficial. And you can combine that then with any other niche. You can do that in a commercial space. You can do it in a residential space. And that's an example of how one niche can dovetail into another to end up with an offering that, again, will distinguish you more from other investors. Or because when you're doing these kinds of things, you're pursuing either capital through equity investment or through lenders, and the more you can, the less you do you, the more you can differentiate yourself by having that niche and having that knowledge. The better you're going to be able to present yourself, and that's an important part of what we do, is presenting well to investors and people with capital. Anything else? So how do you find your niche? This is like, we get this question quite often. How did you guys end up in student housing? Which is what we do primarily. And the answer to that is, in our case, serendipity. The second project that we bought and developed in Ottawa, we found a bungalow on a decent sized lot at a fantastic price. And the market at the time was pretty strong. So we went right out and got it under contract. And then we said, okay, great, we've got it. Now what are we going to do with it? And that was the beginning of us finding our niche in student rentals. The property happened to be less than a kilometer away from Algonquin College, and Maria started her research, an important step with every piece of land you acquire, to find out who our tenant was going to be.
So
And
usually you would want to do your research before you acquire the property. But that was presented to us, that property was presented to us by our agent, and we got a incredibly good price for it. So we said, okay, well, let's take it, and then we'll figure out what to do with it.
Even I would go the next step further to that is, we were looking for a bungalow with an unfinished basement because we wanted to put a suite in the basement.
For this type of
property. So it met the criteria that we were looking for when we bought it. But that was a general thing, and the niche part was finding that it's going to get rented by students no matter what we did. So let's purpose build it so that it would be optimized for students.
Because it's always the first advice I give to anybody who would ask, how did you start? What do you do first with your property? First, you need to find your end user, and then you tailor your development to them. Because if you have your end user, you can create what that end user wants. We lost our video. I don't know if everybody can see.
Yeah, we can still see you.
Okay, perfect. Looks like we have not very good
internet
today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we started to focus on student properties because we bought near a university, near a college, Algonquin College, and when we started to do our market research, it was, I still remember the conversation with Maria, and this was some time ago now. It's like 2015, and she said, we can build whatever we want to build, but it's going to get rented by students.
So let's just build something that would be perfect for students. I said.
So, and I said, okay, well, we didn't have the background to understand there was a stigma associated with student rentals when we were doing this research initially. And so I said, okay, great, let's focus on students. And the next 3 projects we did in a row after that first one were all student properties. And so that first project was done with investors. And as we went to the second project and the third project and the fourth project, and we would have conversation, because we had investors for all of them, and we would have the conversation, it would be, well, this is our second student property. Here's the first one. This is what the numbers look like. Here's our third one. Here's our fourth one. And we'd talk about how we were evolving and getting smarter about what we put in the buildings and how they all cash flowed, because it was, pre the interest rates we have today. And but that's an easy story to share with investors, that you've done this once, you've done this twice, you've done this 3-4 times, and here's the results. And you can show them your projects, you can show them the income that you have. And that's another reason to stay focused and stay in one domain or one area. You're building a lot of credibility. When you talk to the investors for the fourth one, the conversation's far different than the first one. When the first one were all my friends, like there were people that I've known for 20 years, and there was a lot of trust and a lot of, well, we know your character, we'll put your money in. The fourth guy was not someone we knew, but he didn't have to be. We had 3 projects behind us, and he saw that, and he was comfortable with that. So that's another benefit to having that niche, is you get that track record in an area where you can confidently say that the 3 I've done previously will help me get this one done, and I know the market, and things are going to be well with that, or do well with that.
Yeah.
Second point to talk to, and I've kind of alluded to it already. Start small and scale up.
First one was not the one that we talk about.
What do you mean?
Well,
Oh,
yes.
Close enough. Close enough. So in terms of finding your niche and developing your niche, the advice we'd give is start small and scale up. And by that we mean your first project probably should not be a 100-unit student rental if you were going to do student rentals, as an example. And the reasons for that are, well, manyfold and probably obvious, but I'll say a few of them anyway. The first one being that you're not going to find the capital to do a 100-unit building your first time out. Even if you found equity investors that were willing to put the equity money into it, you'd have a really hard time getting a lender on board if you haven't done something like this before, and you're talking about a $40 or $50 million project. So you start small. In our case, it was a bungalow that we suited, and we did that, like I said, 4 or 5 times before we did our first new development, where we removed what was there and put something larger on the lot. And the reasons, when you start small, so we started with a renovation of a main floor and putting a unit in the basement, and the amount of capital required is low. The amount of work you're getting done by other contractors, not low, but still not crazy. And your mistakes, I call them $1,000 mistakes, right? When you start small, you make $1,000 mistakes. If you're still making those mistakes as the projects get bigger, they become $10,000 mistakes, and then $50,000 mistakes. And I rather learn my lesson with $1,000 mistakes than I would with $10,000 or $50,000 mistakes. The lesson sticks with you. $1,000 is a pretty big deal on those first budgets. But then you've learned the mistake, and you don't have to make it on a $50,000 line item in a subsequent budget. So starting small gives you the opportunity to make small mistakes. Also gives you the opportunity to focus on work where you don't need that many consultants to help you out. Our first projects, I did the drafting. And I'm an engineer, maybe not everybody can do the drafting, but honestly, when I talk to the people at the city, they said they get drawings all the time from homeowners that are sketched out in like freehand on paper with dimensions written on them. And if you're a homeowner, they'll accept that. If you're an architect, not so much. But if you're the owner of the property, the standard that they have for what they'll take for a permit application is quite a bit lower. So you don't necessarily have to engage with a whole bunch of consultants to get a building permit for a more modest project.
Yeah. And you want to sharpen your knowledge on smaller projects as well, because if you want to target special audience, students or young professionals or elderly people, you learn what works best on small developments, and then when you grow, you already can apply those your knowledge.
Yeah. Another reason to start small and grow your project size and scope as you go is one of the preconditions for lenders when they look at your projects is what's your net worth like. So if you want to start with a $15 million project, you should have a multi-million-dollar net worth in order for the lender to consider you to be someone that's qualified to sign the guarantees for a project that size. If you're signing guarantees for like a $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 project, your net worth needs to be much more modest for the lender to be comfortable that you have the financial resources to deal with a bump in the road on a project that size.
They
So
also look for your experience.
That too.
In similar area.
Yeah. And you can get experience by having other people come into your project with you. Mind you, you can get net worth that way too if you're willing to give up equity. But now you're you're leaning on somebody else's knowledge and somebody else's net worth to qualify for your project, qualify for your lending for your project or your permits, and you're if you're okay with giving up that control, that's fine. If this is something that you want to do where you take the lead, then you're obliged to grow. Start small and scale up. I will say you're obliged to grow, not just step right into the big projects. So we move on then and talk about research and market trends, and this goes to that concept I spoke about earlier, where you're going to dive deep in one area and become very knowledgeable on that one area. So whether it's student housing or senior living or commercial space for I don't know because I don't do commercial space, but let's say you want to be a landowner for a coffee shop, so you have to do your research and understand what that market is looking for. And if you have a niche and you want to focus in one area, then your research, the scale of research you have to do, whilst not trivial, is at least a manageable, like it's a bite-sized piece that you can chew off and start to work on. And you can grow your ability to understand that market and your knowledge of what that tenant is looking for and how to develop or design or construct something that's going to appeal to them and is going to differentiate your offering from the other offerings in the market. And that comes again from having decided to have an expertise and to dive deep in that area. So your ability to focus on research for your particular niche is it keeps the problem or keeps the scope of work at a scale that's manageable. So identifying your niches, that can come through, well, in our case, as I said, it came through, we acquired a property and we understood after we had it in hand, actually after we had it under contract, but not yet in hand, but that's a detail. But it was firm. The deal was firm. We knew we were going to close on it. And that's when we discovered, hey, this is going to be student housing no matter what we build. So let's build something for students. And if
it can be also depending on your area of your interest. If you really focused on sustainable development, you can go and develop net zero houses. Or if you concern about elderly people more than anything else, you might want to go and develop some senior living. It depends on your interest and your also area of expertise, because if you had before you started real estate development, many people had different education and skills and different background. If you can apply that in your real estate development, it will put you more forward compared to other people in your area who doesn't have those skills.
Yes. So we'll move on and talk about some other things that come along with finding a niche. Assessing regulatory and legal considerations. So I can tell you as an operator of student housing, being aware of the bylaws the city has in place to deal with garbage, noise, all the things that are stereotypically associated with student housing. We're very aware of those, and we understand how to not run afoul of them. That's not an area of expertise that you would necessarily have if you were taking care of seniors, for instance, who we tend to think of as being more socially conscious people than young adults first away from the home where their parents are taking care of them. So that kind of thing is knowledge that you're going to acquire. However, while you may not be worried about garbage and noise with seniors, you may be more concerned about accessibility and how emergency vehicles can get to a place that you might have. Things that are more pertinent to
parking is more important for adult and senior people than for younger generation.
Correct. So those are, I think, simple examples of how you're going to be more knowledgeable about the regulatory environment that your particular niche requires you to operate in. And you can study the entire bylaw for your city, or if you're going to invest in more than one city, the entire bylaw for all cities that you're interested in, or you can focus on the parts of the bylaws that are relevant to your particular niche. And then it also allows you to define a unique value proposition. I alluded to that earlier. You're going to talk to investors. You're going to talk to other real estate investors. You're going to talk to contractors, to city staff, a whole raft of people you're going to work with as you go through your real estate investing career or journey. And when you talk to those people, if you're, again, a generalist and you don't have anything specific to talk to them about, then that's not going to leave the same impression, or it's not going to let you make the most of that relationship so much as if you have a unique value proposition yourself. I do student housing, and this is why I differentiate my student housing from everybody else on the market. Or I do seniors living, and this is how we differentiate ourselves from every other senior housing complex on the market. You want to have a niche, and you want to put yourself in that niche in a unique way so that your offering is distinguishable from everybody else's. And that helps you talk to investors, it helps you talk to lenders, it helps you talk to everybody. So don't know how to tell you how to pick your niche. That really comes to everybody's personal experience and desire for where you want to go and where you want to grow. But we can definitely advocate for everybody should have a niche. And you can move around in your niche. You can even move from one niche to the other. But you want to try to stay focused in an area. That's the general message that we're trying to give. And once you have focused in that area, whatever it happens to be, I won't say everything else becomes more clear. It becomes clearer. It doesn't become necessarily easier, but at least you know these are the areas I have to focus in, and those things don't have much to do with my niche, so I don't have to grow my knowledge in those areas nearly as much. And given that there's a mountain of information to take in, the more you can focus and deal with a little bit of the mountain at a time, the more successful you're going to be.